My name is Jordan Creed, and for 6 years, I worked at Westbridge and Holt, the boutique consulting firm founded by my wife's father, Derek Holt. Most people assumed I had it made, married to the boss's daughter, part of the inner circle. They saw me at company dinners, seated at the front, with Amira by my side. Derek giving me that self-satisfied grin that suggested I was one of his chosen few. But what they didn't see, what they didn't want to see, were the 12 rejections. 12 times I'd applied for a promotion I'd earned twice over. 12 times I'd sat across from Derek in his glass-walled office, watching him fold his hands like a benevolent god and deliver the same line in a dozen different ways. "You're close, Jordan. Let's revisit this next quarter. I just need you to prove yourself a little longer." Every time he punctuated those words with that polished Holt smile, the one that never reached his eyes, and every time I'd swallow my pride and nod like a loyal son-in-law, because that's what everyone expected. That day was a Thursday, late summer, the kind of day where the sun poured through the blinds and cast sharp lines across the floor. I could smell the old leather of the chair he'd picked himself, the faint scent of polish and aftershave lingering in the air like an accusation. He slid the folder across his desk. The motion was so practiced, it felt rehearsed. I'd memorized the shape of his hands, the way the veins stood out on the backs of them, the gold cufflinks glinting in the fluorescent light. I'd been here before, each time hoping this would be different. Each time convincing myself he'd finally see me. But when he spoke, in that measured tone, the one he used when he needed to be both mentor and gatekeeper, I already knew. "You're close, Jordan," he said. "I just need to see a bit more initiative in leadership. Let's revisit this next quarter." It was like hearing a scratched record. I felt the laugh bubble up in my chest. But it wasn't joy or relief or even disbelief. It was the laugh of a man who'd finally stopped caring. I let it out. One short bark of laughter. Derek's eyes narrowed. The practiced smile froze. "Something funny?" he asked, his voice sharp around the edges. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking under the shift of my weight, and let the silence stretch just long enough to let him know. The spell was broken. "No," I said. "Nothing funny at all." I stood, leaving the folder unopened on the edge of his desk, like a dare. "Thanks for your time, Derek." His brows drew together, that fake concern creeping into his voice. "Jordan, this isn't personal," he said, like he'd rehearsed that line too. "Your family. I'm only looking out for what's best for the company." Family. That word hit like a slap. He'd used it as a shield. For every slight, every rejection, every time he pulled the rug out from under me and expected me to thank him for the privilege. I felt the rage flicker, then die, replaced by something colder, more resolute. Family. That was the line. That was the game, and I was done playing it. I walked out of that office and down the hallway, past the framed awards and smiling portraits of Derek with his arm around senators and CEOs, past the receptionist who gave me a pitying smile like she'd just seen me get my heart broken. Maybe I had. Maybe that was the point. Because in that moment, in that final laugh, I knew I was done being the loyal son-in-law. I reached my desk, the same one they'd stuck me at for 6 years, next to the supply closet and the perpetually broken coffee machine. I sat down, stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. For a moment, I felt the weight of every late night I'd worked, every weekend I'd given up, every idea I'd shared that someone else had claimed as their own. I thought of Amira, how she always shrugged off my frustration with that same dismissive smile her father used. "He's just looking out for the company, Jordan," she'd say, sipping her wine and scrolling through her phone. Like my ambition was a minor inconvenience. I thought of every maybe next quarter, every almost, every promise. That turned to dust. and I felt the corners of my mouth twitch upward, not in a smile, but in the quiet resolve of a man who's done waiting. I stood again, feeling the blood rush in my ears. I looked around the office one last time. I saw the interns clustered in the corner, laughing at some inside joke they'd share on Slack. The senior partners in Derek's office, strategizing how to land the next big contract. And I saw myself, reflected in the glass, a man wearing a suit that didn't quite fit anymore, a tie a little too tight, eyes too tired from nights spent chasing approval that would never come. I reached for my bag and packed it slowly, methodically, as if every item I tucked away was a piece of my old life I was sealing off forever. Because in that moment, I wasn't just Jordan Creed, the man behind the desk at Westbridge and Holt. I was something else, something sharper, clearer, more dangerous. Was the man who'd finally stopped caring, and that made me free. Patch every custom script, every workaround that made it function seamlessly. Finally, Rovian, their regulatory compliance tracker, had been a mess. I'd built a new one from scratch, anticipating every audit point, every workflow bottleneck. Made it so they could sleep at night, knowing their patient data wouldn't end up on the front page of the journal. As I documented, I saw the patterns, the dependencies no one else had bothered to understand. Every time they'd asked me to fix it, I'd done so without question. But now, I wasn't just fixing things. I was learning. I was building a roadmap of the company's backbone, and it all pointed to me. I wasn't cocky enough to think I was irreplaceable, but I was smart enough to know they'd bleed before they could, fill the gaps, and that was a power I'd never realized I had. It changed how I walked the halls. When Derek's latest golden boy needed help prepping for a client demo, I was there, with a polite smile and a few well-placed insights that made him look good, but only because I chose to. When the partners gathered for strategy huddles, I sat at the edge of the table listening, storing every word. Not because I wanted to be included, but because I wanted to know exactly how much they depended on me. They had no idea I was planning my own exit. I didn't need to brag or posture. I had the receipts, the data, the hard evidence. That, the glue they'd taken for granted all these years, was the only thing keeping the place from falling apart. I'd always been good at blending in, at making myself seem like the team player, the guy who would go the extra mile. But inside, something had shifted. I'd become the man who understood